A concern was brought up that you can actually access the head of the non-removable pin set screw from the exterior when a door is closed. And in my experience over decades of selling this hardware, I have never heard one story of someone having done that in the past. Never heard it once. I've been locked out on the wrong side of doors that swung out, and can say from firsthand knowledge that I've not been able to defeat a hinge that way because I couldn't access the set screw. Having said that, not every manufacturer hides that set screw as well as others. I happened to grab a wide throw hinge off the shelf. It was the nearest one to my desk. This is a non-removable pin hinge. And what we're studying here is where you would actually see the set screw. Now this is a great example though, because with a wide throw hinge, you would have the potential for much greater room onto which to work the back side of the set screw access from the face of the door. This is a standard hinge. That's a wide throw hinge. So I'd have a lot more room to get to the back side of that. Now, you can't even see the set screw up. This is, by the way, this hinge is from Bomber Manufacturing. You can see evidence of the set screw right there, and you can see it now that I open it up because I tucked that right there. You cannot access that from the outside. You cannot. That's all there is to it. There are domestically manufactured, my experience, Bomber, Hager, McKinney, Stanley, Ives, I'm sure forgetting some. You can't access those heads of screws from the backside. There are other hinges where the point, as I said earlier, is not as tucked away. So when the door is in the closed position, you can see evidence of that. And while I'm telling you that I've never heard in over 25 years someone removing that set screw and just popping the pin out, I don't say that it couldn't happen. But I will say that I've never heard of it. I suppose if you were determined enough and the hinge was of sufficient, if the hinge was of ample deficient engineering and manufacturing, I would argue the point that you could get to it. But the door is going to come up to here, and if you were going to defeat it, it would certainly be a specialty tool that someone would be knowingly manufacturing to get into a door that obviously they're not supposed to be going into, let's just say. But the good point is raised that there are other options in terms of security pin hinges, and there certainly are. I'm going to move my secondary camera up to a part of the Stanley catalog that we can see here. What we've got here is the first section of what's called a non-rising pin. And non-rising pin really only means that the pin is naturally not going to rise up out of the inner workings of the barrel of the hinge, because there will be a knurling on the top of the pin. It's naturally not prone to work its way up. That's a non-rising pin. Practically all hinges are non-rising pins. NRP is, and this is right out of the Stanley catalog that you can refer to, and I will link to it as well, and you can scroll through it. A non-removable pin is that set screw concept, where when set, it will seat into the slot that's cut in the pin, and in my experience, is impossible to drive that out. I've tried. I found that it's impossible to do that. However, there's the poor man's way to do this as well. Not the poor man's, but the smart man's. I had an old carpenter tell me one time, he says, I don't buy any non-removable pin hinges. I says, really? Okay, so what do you do for an outswing door? And he told me, and it works obviously on wood doors and wood frames, but you can take this concept and maybe create your own variant of this. The carpenter would take a double head nail, a 16-penny double head nail, a nail that's going to be used with the express intention for you to be able to pull it out after the fact. If you're building a concrete form, you might use double head nails, or it's literally a 16-penny nail that has two heads on it, meaning The second top head, you can get the back of your claw hammer on and pull it out. He would nail that double head nail into the edge of the door, then he would drill a hole into the frame so that when the door closed, that extra head stuck into the jamb. So if you took that principle on your own and modified it to suit, you might be in real good shape with your own way to make a security pin installation. However, that same concept is very well illustrated in the Stanley catalog by the security stud concept, and I'm going to illustrate that better there. Security studs, we hardly ever sell them. I don't know why, except that they're not stock and they're more money, so that's probably why. But in the event when you have a application that you must guarantee against someone coming in, you're going to want to think about a security stud. It's exactly as shown there in the drawing. It's a stud that's applied to the leaf of the hinge, so that, and the hole is drilled on the other side, so that when the hinge closes, you can drive that pin out all you want. Drive it out, leave it out. The door's still not going to tip out. You could, I suppose, well, I won't suppose on how to defeat a security stud hinge, but they're specifically intended for that. And then, of course, you've got variants of that where your application might be institutional. It might be for a prison application where the studs become incredibly shear resistant, where having that happen, defeating a hinge in that way, is practically all but impossible. There's other variants of security pin type hinges that I suppose you could certainly encounter. I've had people install doors and frames, and they would just tack weld the hinge pin down to the barrel. You can also order certain hinges with an RP, or a riveted pin. Think of the head of a rivet, and both ends are riveted together. That's impossible to drive out. The point of the matter is, any hinge that you're going to purchase, by definition, to be non-removable pin, you can't gain access to that back of that set screw. And if you have hinges that are like that, or if you're considering purchase, or you need to purchase such, you'll want to be very sure and have that discussion with your distributor. I want the hinge that there's no way to get a tiny modified tool onto the set screw. This hinge from Bomber and all Bomber hinges, it's not going to happen. Stanley, it's not going to happen. McKinney, it's not going to happen. Hager, it's not going to happen. Ives, it's not going to happen. These are all hinges I've seen in the past. So be cognizant of that. Be aware of where you're buying the hinge from. Make sure that who you're buying it from has your best interest in mind and not selling you a hinge that can be defeated in that way. And to the person who raised the initial concern, please share with us any further examples of how we can post out in the world via this question and answer sort of response experiences that you exactly have. What was used? How was it done? Etc. I think it benefits the greater good of all that are reviewing this. Thank you.